When is America going to wake up? It's like we're in a trance. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Welcome back. Margot from Wisconsin was just asking this question, and I want to try to answer it. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, and we can extend this conversation into the next hour, although I've got a couple of pretty good rants and a lot of news for you to open the next hour. But in any case, she asked the question, when do we as a country wake up? You know, I briefly teased this story as we were hitting the break about this guy in Michigan who walked into a store, and the greeter at the store said, "Sir, you have to wear a mask." And he walked over to the greeter who was wearing a mask and grabbed a piece of her uniform and wiped his nose on it and said, "I guess I'll use this as my mask." And then he ran out of the store and escaped in a van, and they're trying to find him based on the footage. But they've got you can see this. It's all over the internet. You can see the footage of this guy walking up and wiping his nose on this person. I mean, when do we wake up to what's going on here? When do we wake up to the destruction of our democracy? When do we wake up to how sick and pathological what's going on is? This Faustian bargain that Trump is making with the billionaires about how many Americans are going to die in exchange for reopening the economy. And I think I have an answer to that. Right now, we have an infection rate across the United States. You know, we've got 3 million cases that we know of in the United States. Let's say, we're moving and closing in on 4 million cases that we know. Well, let's stay with 3 million because there's 330 million Americans. So if you've got 3 million cases and there's 330 million people, we're about 1%. So in reality, probably about 2% of America, maybe 3% of America, if you consider all the silent infections and everything else, the asymptomatic people out there are infected. And a small percentage of those people are going to have somebody who is old or poor or in poor health in their family who's going to die from this. So the deaths right now are affecting probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 2% of American families. Now, it's regional. If you live in New York City, or particularly if you live in Crown Heights or New Rochelle, then, the odds are probably more like 5 or 10% of the people there have somebody in their family who died. But in the red states, it's probably 1/10 of 1% of the people have somebody in their family who has died from this. And I'm of the opinion that things don't get real for Americans until it affects them personally. So the shutdown has gotten real for people. You've got, 30% unemployment right now. Or at least 20%. We're at Great Depression levels of unemployment. So pretty much everybody has somebody in their family or somebody that they know who has been hurt by the shutdown. And so that rage is spreading across the country very rapidly. And in those states, like I was listening to Oregon Public Radio this morning, and they were talking about how, there's this huge reopen the economy movement in Oregon, and the argument that these people are making, and they're making it, some of them are state legislators, the argument that they're making is, we've had no deaths in 2 days here in Oregon. So why don't we open the economy back up? And what they're missing, of course, is that the reason we've had no deaths is because the economy's closed. But it's going to hit a point where governors can't resist that pressure anymore. They have fewer deaths because they're being successful. It's only, here in Oregon, it's probably affecting 1/10 of 1% of families have had somebody die or get sick from this in a way that would scare them. But if we open the economy back up here, it's going to go from 1% to 5 or 6% or 7 or 8% or even 10%. Look at Italy. Look at Spain. Look at Hubei province in China. And when that happens, I think that Americans will wake up. It seems like the threshold is probably going to be 5 or 10%. When 5 or 10% of American families have a family member who has died, a young person who has died from a stroke or heart attack caused by COVID, an older person who has died from the lung disease caused by COVID, a member of their family who is obese, which seems to be the second largest. The risk factors are number 1, being over 60, number 2, being obese, number 3, having high blood pressure, which tends to track old age. So, and then number 4, you get into things like diabetes. And there's a lot of people in America. A third of this country is overweight, is obese. So it's going to start hitting families, and it's going to start hitting young people. And as it does, I think Americans are going to start saying, oh, wait a minute. And the question is, if Trump had maintained the social distancing all through the summer, so the death rates were really low and most families weren't affected, he probably could have gotten to the election day blaming the bad economy on Democrats and public health officials, saying, see, very few deaths, we protected the country, now re-elect me and I'll put everything back together. That would have been his best strategy. It's sort of like what Nixon did with the Vietnam War in 1972. See, it's getting better. But instead, he thinks he has to have the economy right now, so he wants to reopen the economy. Well, reopening the economy, and it's happening in the red states, is going to cause an explosion of deaths, which is going to cause people to say, whoa, wait a minute, my grandpa just died. My obese brother-in-law just died. And at that point, they're going to start thinking, I might die. And I think that this is going to happen by October, November, September, October, November, because there's about a 3-month lag from the time that people are initially exposed, look at January, February here in the United States, to the time that people start dropping like flies, March, April. And that was in big cities, in blue state, in Seattle and they didn't drop like flies because Jay Inslee stepped in very, very quickly. But New York State, de Blasio and Cuomo kind of procrastinated, and boom, they got hit. They got nailed. Well, that's what's going to happen in the red states. And when that happens in the red states, I'm of the opinion that it's really going to start collapsing around Donald Trump. And the question at that point is, okay, when he's really freaking out this fall, as the second wave comes, is he going to start a war?